Very good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to yet another uLaw webinar. In today's webinar, we're going to talk about the law office or the legal office's client management principles. We'll talk about, really one-on-one of how you would intake a client to your legal firm, how you would manage the client through the workflow of creating a file for that client, the obligations that you have as a legal professional with the different set of documents that you have to generate, such as the client intake form, a conflict screening report that allows you to stay compliant but also be prudent about how you manage your client's information. Today's webinar has been accredited for 1 hour of professionalism CPD credits across Ontario, British Columbia, and New Brunswick. So for our legal professional friends joining us from these provinces, you can search up for this particular line, Law Office Client Management, and you would be able to use that to log, I think, 1 hour, not I think, I know for sure, sorry, 1 hour of CPD credits, okay? Professionalism CPD credits. Law Office Client Management is the name that you search up for. Fantastic. Quick housekeeping, would sincerely appreciate it if you could mute your phone lines and use the chat window to collaborate with us. Our support staff are online to answer any questions that you may have during any given time in this webinar. And please feel free to join us in asking questions so that we can all learn together. Like every other uLaw webinar, today's webinar has a specific agenda. We're going to talk about the whole client intake process, some of the key data points that you as a legal professional are required to capture. Now, these data points may differ based on the areas of practice, the sensitivity of the practice itself, whether this was legal aid or this was a private client, right? There are many different factors that govern the information that you're able to capture for a specific client. And we'll talk about the compliance documents that the Law Society expects out of you as a legal professional as you go down this path of creating a client. How do you manage ghost clients? How do you convert a ghost client back to a client who's retaining you, and vice versa? And let's say someone does provide you with some basic information but does not retain you. How can you simply non-engage that client? The responsibilities that you have to ensure that you non-engage that client, to bring a logical closure, if you will, to that relationship with that particular client contact, okay? So we'll talk about those as well. Group management, specific to utilizing your time and understanding how you can create groups within your practice management or within any system that you use so that it's faster retrieval of information, as well as the concept of associating a contact to be a specific party type in a matter, right? So maybe a plaintiff-defendant situation. So even if you're representing the plaintiff, you could actually have the contact information of the defendant, associate that defendant in a matter so that it's further utilized for conflict screening purposes as well. Okay, so that's kind of really our next topic about how do you handle conflict checks and, as I said, non-engagements for those clients who don't end up retaining you. At a very high level, if you look at the legal or the Law Society's requirements, we look at client ID verification as a very important document, whether that's a driver's license, a passport, or whatever information that you've captured, a physical client ID verification, to verify that this is truly the person that he or she is claiming to be. Retainer letter and authorization letter. Often, the Law Society would audit you to ensure that you're following the process, some of the guidelines provided about how you engage with the client, whether that's through a retainer letter, whether that's through a client engagement letter, but in some cases you may actually require authorization letters, if it's Wilson Estate or other silos of practice where it entails you to require that. But retainer letter is always looked at as a very important document that outlines the key responsibilities that you have with regards to handling your client information, as well as the key responsibilities that you entrust in the client with regards to how they pay you on time, the appropriate retainer top-ups that are required, the communication channels between the two parties, keeping up time, etc. Right? So the retainer letter is very important, not only for you to document the financial relationship and obligations that you have with managing the matter for that client, but also goes to set the expectations and the two-way responsibilities that both you and your client are expected to meet. Okay? Source of contact is a very interesting document. We'll talk a little bit more about that. It's, I would say, a two-pronged approach to how you would utilize that. Certain audit requirements may require you to showcase that just to make sure that they get a better perspective of how your legal office operates, and it's just not a referral source for work. But more importantly, you as a legal professional can actually use the source of contact report as a great repository of providing you with information about your leads. Where are your clients coming from? Where are they learning about your firm? And what's really working from a marketing standpoint, right? We'll talk a little bit more about that and how important it is for you to utilize that one document to improve upon the marketing effort that you may want to invest in to grow your firm's footprint. Okay? There are other documents such as credit card authorizations, if someone's actually leaving a credit card on file to process whether retainers or otherwise. So we'll talk about those required documents as well. And last but not the least, we'll look at simple, easy practice management best practices for the 21st century legal individual, such as utilizing your phone to import information, contact information, and exporting contact information. All of this being a time saver so that you can put that to better use to serve your clients. Looking at contact analytics, really understanding a client from various different aspects of the data that they provide, right? So you could really understand the fee book from what's all the different revenue that you recognize or revenue that you realize from that particular client. You could look at what is their aging in terms of, in general, how long does this client take to make a payment? If you've agreed upon on your retainer letter a net 30 payment plan, and if you find out that unfortunately this client has been a bit of an overrun with regards to payment, maybe their days on sale is about 35, as you retain that customer for other engagements, those are types of important components that you can keep in mind and share with your firm to make sure that maybe you're putting now an interest in the next engagement that you have with that client, right? Data is very key, and our value proposition is if you utilize the data the right way, then you are doing better not only for yourself as a business owner, but also as a legal professional with the compliance requirements. And finally, we'll also talk about how you could use, the whole idea of branding as a great segue as you touch base with these contacts. So this is a great time of the year to utilize branding, whether you're sending Christmas letters through a branded envelope or a letterhead that really talks about wishing them during this holiday season, as well as other forms of informal documents, I would say, that can truly outline, or even sometimes invoices that kind of have the theme of the season. Each firm is very different in how they approach their branding towards their clients, but these are some examples that you can keep in mind as you plan and prepare for such branding events or branding touch points with your clients through your firm. Okay? So obviously it's going to be a very packed session that walks you through some of the basic understanding of right from client intake to how you use branding to deal with client management or contact management from cradle to grave. And time permitting, we'll probably use the examples that we have at uLawPractice, being a legal accounting practice management software, we'll utilize that as just as an example to show you how you could do client intake and generate a bunch of these documents that are relevant throughout the compliance channels. So let's just start with what that client intake process is and what are the key components that you need to keep in mind as you go through that process. Okay? So truly from a professional obligation about client intake, service, and communication, this is a small subset of the larger webinar that we conduct on the obligations of a legal professional. From a client intake process, obviously it's important that you capture the information such as name, whether if it's an individual, first name, last name, if it's a company or you're working with the organization, then the company's name, information such as their phone number, their address, wherever pertinent. You could capture the source of contact right there during the client intake, because let's say someone just walked into your office and wants to retain you, that's a fantastic opportunity for you to ask them as to how they got to know you. Maybe it was a walk-in, maybe it was a marketing event, maybe it was a law society referral, or even if it's a phone call to ask you for some basic information. So capturing the detailed recording of the call and consultation and just the in-person meeting as you intake that client is a very key first step in the life cycle of that client intake. Now, once you've had that intake completed and it's successful, an important obligation that you have as a legal professional is to do what they call a conflict check. Okay? Before you go about creating a matter or a file to further proceed with having that client retain or have that client retain you as a legal professional, it's important that you ensure or you're completely in understanding of any conflicts that there may arise in representing that client. The conflicts could be that you've dealt with this client in a previous file, you've come across and that information has been provided by the specific individual in a totally different matter. You may have dealt with this person's brother or sister, any relationship. So in some way, there is a certain conflict because of certain information that may be to your advantage in having known this person before. So what's important is that for you to have a process or a system that allows you to quickly search for these conflicts. Okay? When you just get started with a firm, and if you're just having a handful of clients, then it's probably easier to be dealt with because you just know if there's just 5 clients, you pretty much know if you've dealt with these clients before or not. But when your firm does grow and you're now dealing with hundreds and thousands of clients, then that's when the database itself becomes, I would say, a little out of hand for a manual system to deal with, for your eyes to deal with. So that's when you probably need a system or a process or a software that allows you to automate or quickly validate the conflicts and give it to you in a report so that you can make a quick, informed decision, right? Because especially if the person is waiting or is in front of you, you probably want to do that conflict check right away before you accept that retainer letter or sign up that retainer letter and accept that check, right? So conflict check is a very important information for any confidential information that you may have already processed through that client. Now let's assume that you've done your conflict screening and you're comfortable to go further and work with this client. As part of that client intake, service, and communication that touches the client, it's very important that through that retainer letter, we spoke about how the retainer letter becomes a very important formal document of engagement, or otherwise called as a client engagement letter. So in certain cases, you may entertain the retainer because you have a trust account. Now for legal professionals that do not have a trust account and only have a general account, then it's called an engagement letter, which obviously outlines the obligations of you as a legal professional or your law firm, as well as the obligations of the client, as we discussed, about paying you on time, ensuring that they communicate back to you on time on the set principles that you've set around the engagement, setting expectations that if they don't pay you on time, what the consequences are so that everyone's on the same page. Sometimes retainer letters may also contain certain cycles during which you would generate an invoice to the client. Let's say in a corporate client, you may actually set up a monthly or a bi-weekly cycle to generate an invoice to get paid if they're retaining you. So there's many different facets to a retainer letter or an engagement letter based on the style of practice. So it's important that you're cognizant of these different nuances, and then you alter the retainer letter or engagement letter based on the specific need of that situation. Okay, but it's fundamentally important that you sign up a retainer or an engagement letter and you determine the collateral or the fees. What is the fee structure? Very important, right? Because one of the important components that a client wants to understand is how do you charge? Do you charge on a time and material basis? Do you charge on a flat rate? The client really wants to understand that they get a better hold on the overall expenditure that they may have to incur in working with the legal firm, right? That's always a concern. So if you can actually ease that concern by making it very specific and clear, in some cases, obviously criminal, in certain cases where the matter is going to be, it's going to take time, and it could be a contingency, it could be an ongoing time and material. But regardless, it's important for you as a legal professional to make it as clear as to what that fee structure is going to look like. If you're dealing with, again, a trust account and you're dealing with retainers being accepted by your law firm, very important that you, again, set boundaries of how you plan to accept that retainer. Certain law firms would not accept cash retainers, though the Law Society allows legal firms to accept up to about $7,500 of cash retainers. Just as a policy of not wanting to deal with cash, they may set boundaries and policies that says, unfortunately, our law firm does not accept retainers in cash, so would appreciate a check or a bank draft or credit card, right, making it easier so that it's a trackable record of that transaction. So setting those obligations and policies, very important. And once you accepted that retainer and you've signed that agreement, retainer letter, and let's assume that the client paid you in check, it's important that you provide back the client as part of that service and communication and that intake process. You provide back a receipt. Very important to provide a retainer receipt, not only to ensure that you're on the same page, but to avoid any conflicts in the future, right? Because you don't want a client to come back to you saying, especially if you've not provided them with the receipt, saying that instead of $100 in retainer, they actually paid $1,000. We've heard of certain cases, the rare occurrences of such cases amongst our clients. So very important that if the client did pay you $1,000 or if the client did pay you $100 of retainer, give them a receipt, have them sign it so that everybody's on the same page. Now the last one is obviously an anomaly, but certainly it happens in real life. So this is the situation we spoke about earlier about a prospective client walking into your office, providing you with information. So they've given you their first name, last name. They may have given their driver's license. They may even have given you their address. Or this could typically be on a phone conversation where they're actually providing you information. And then they come back to say that, all right, let me think about it. Maybe this is a slip and fall matter and they're thinking about whether they really want to take their neighbor to court. But for whatever reason, they do not retain your legal firm. They never come back. You've never heard from them in several weeks. And those are situations where that prospective client is otherwise termed as a ghost client, someone who just came in and then just suddenly disappeared, right? It's your obligation as a legal professional to ensure that you're, safeguarding your interest, that you explicitly provide a non-engagement letter, even for someone who's not engaged you, right? Basically saying, hey, you provided us this information, it's been several weeks, we'd hoped for it, but you haven't. Henceforth, I'm making it very clear that, I have no obligation of representing you. Okay, that's case number one. Case number two, someone did engage you, right, and has provided you with a retainer letter. You accepted it at that particular time, and for whatever reason, could be just matter itself, could be anything, right? You decide to not engage, or if the client decides to not engage. And these are important things to consider when you type or drop that retainer letter. What is the methodology or the process for someone to not engage? And you want to keep that as a two-way street. Because if it's a really hard customer to work with, sometimes you may need the luxury in that document to say that you can non-engage them too. In which case, too, you provide them with a detailed non-engagement letter and thanking them for their business, but being very clear that going forward, you or your legal firm has no obligation of representing that client. Okay? So the non-engagement letter is a very important document to provide a logical closure to sometimes maybe an open-ended relationship with the client. Okay? So those top 5 things to keep in mind: clear consultation and recording of details of the client, ensuring that you're doing a conflict check or conflict screening. Once you've done that, signing a retainer or an engagement letter that clearly outlines responsibilities, including the fee structure. Making sure that if you deal with trust, very important at that particular time that you provide the client with a trust receipt, similar to a payment receipt. And last but not the least, keeping in mind a process to be built into your firm's policies or overall set of documents and process to provide non-engagement letters to clients, be it ghost clients or others that you non-engage as part of that life cycle. So for those who just joined us a bit late, just reiterating, the name of today's webinar is the Law Office Client Management, and this webinar has been accredited for 1 hour of professionalism CPD credits. So when you do log into your Law Society's portal, this is the name that you're searching up. Okay? Fantastic. So moving along, just a quick snapshot, and we already spoke about this, but just to give you a quick snapshot of some salient points to keep in mind when you drop that retainer letter. Okay? Nature and scope of matter, making sure that, hey, this is a small claims matter, this is a landlord and tenant board, this is a criminal matter, whatever is the nature, and what is that you're looking to accomplish, and what is the scope of that matter. As I mentioned earlier, this is one component that's missed out on many retainer letters as we survey our clients and talk to industry professionals. Ensuring that you draft a paragraph or a couple of paragraphs or how many other paragraphs as it is required to outline the responsibilities of the client as well. Okay? Scheduling and course of representation. So really, if you can, and based on the nature of the matter itself, putting together, the court visits, expectations, ensuring that you're properly scheduling the course of representation. Method and frequency of communication. When you're dealing with that client through that retainer letter, and you can obviously go through that retainer letter. It's definitely an important step if you can go through that retainer letter in full detail with your client, but truly outlining how you plan to communicate with that client moving forward. Is that through mail? Is it through an electronic communication? Is this, chat, WhatsApp, whatever is the communication channel that you offer to communicate? Obviously, each channel comes with its own set of risks and rewards, right? So for sensitive information, obviously texting and WhatsApping is obviously frowned upon. It's not a great formal channel to deal with. Even electronic meets sometimes these days, if you're old school, is something to deal with caution. But there's a lot of reward. I mean, in today's world, time is money. Everyone expects things to happen in a very fast pace. They're not going to be waiting for a response via mail. So email almost is an accepted norm, right, in today's context. So setting the expectation that, yes, you will email and you will be responding within 3 hours or something like that so that your client really knows the obligation. Setting up arrangements for retainers, so initial $2,000, then every time the retainer drops below $500, topping it up to another $1,000. Those are the types of arrangements that you can think about based on the nature of the business. If it's a simple POA matter, then it's not as convoluted as a criminal matter, for example, right? Or maybe it's a contingency matter or a retainer plus a contingency. So depending on how you figure out what's best for your firm to make the revenue for your firm, you still want to have that documented and drafted in that retainer letter. We spoke about termination details, right? If for whatever reason the client does not meet these obligations or other reasons why the client needs to not engage you, opportunity to not engage that engagement. Confidentiality, so making sure that you as a legal professional are responsible and you understand your responsibilities to ensure client confidentiality. Okay, and last but not least, we spoke about, if you can, outlining or talking to your client about the risks involved in an email, sending out an email, utilizing certain types of methods of communication. Okay. This is a nice segue to what is truly expected from a law society audit, or what certain auditors may look for as part of a set of compliance documents from a client perspective, right? We spoke about this earlier, but client ID verification document. So the auditor would probably ask you, and these are best practices, right? Obviously, the ledgers and journals are extremely important, and those are certain components that are very strict. But there are also guidelines. There are also certain practice management guidelines that are important that legal professionals deal with to ensure a level of professionalism, to ensure that you're safeguarding not only yourself, but the legal industry as well. So the law societies of different provinces have these different business, I would say, policies or best practice guidelines that they would like for you to adhere to. So client ID verification document is a very important document, ensuring that you've truly acknowledged that this is, through a mechanism, understood that this is truly the client that you're dealing with, right? So if it's John Doe and the person doesn't have a driver's license, or the driver's license says something else, then that's not a very prudent client intake. You want to make sure that John Doe actually has a driver's license that says John Doe, and hopefully with a similar resembling face and a photo, right? And if it's a corporation that you're dealing with, then obviously the corporation incorporation documents, who is the CEO of that company, and maybe details of that individual. Again, based on the nature and scope of that work. But verifying the client through an ID, very important document. So this typically could be a scanned driver's license that you put on file, and telling the auditor or the law society that, hey, you know what, I did the right thing. I did take his driver's license to ensure that and validated his client ID. A client intake form. So a simple form, and you can drop this, you can have this on your website to make it simpler, faster for clients to engage with you. This could be a client intake set of questions that you ask through a prompter on a phone call. It could be a toll-free number that you set yourself up for, and then have clients leave in a very confidential manner information about themselves and what they're looking for through your firm. Or this could be a form that someone fills out in your physical address if they walk into your firm, right? The client intake form, as we spoke earlier, talks about some of the basic information about the name, address wherever applicable, a contact information or a correspondence address wherever applicable, And you could also extend this to, if it's a company, you can get their website, fax number, etc. Ensuring that you have a process or a template or a methodology to sign up retainer letters. And retainer letters, it's great to have different silos or different styles to deal with different types of businesses or areas of practice. Instead of having one standard retainer letter, if you're dealing with multiple areas of practice, it's a good thing to consider is to have different templates based on the nature of the beast. Right? For certain matters, you may deal with, or certain areas of practice rather, you may deal with a fixed or a flat rate with a fee cap. For certain silos of practice, maybe through experience, through the data that you've reviewed, or to just talking with friends and colleagues, you may actually just do a billable time. Right? So, very important document that the Law Society expects you to draft is a retainer letter. And if you have a plan for every area of practice that you have, then you get a bonus check in the level of comfort and the level of, I would say, sophistication that you've built in understanding the compliance needs and your preparedness for the same. We spoke about having a receipt for every retainer that you've had, for every client that's retained you. Right? Auditors may ask you for, okay, can you show me the receipts that you've generated for these 5 clients? Very important that you can actually show them that. Conflict check confirmations. So there's actually a Law Society document, and you can download this from the website, or if you're using uLawPractice, it's built in. This is going one step further to truly show your preparedness for that situation. There is a complete document that you can fill out that talks about how you as a legal professional went about judging that this client was not a conflict. So it asks you certain simple questions. Was this a conflict or not? Or even if this was a conflict, why are you determining to move ahead? Or if you're not determining, to say that you're not. And then they ask whether you retained this customer, did you refer them to another legal professional, right? So the conflict check confirmation is one, and then the actual documentation of it is a follow-up document that the Law Society has. Source of contact. Spoke about that. Understanding where your leads are coming from, making sure you use it as a marketing tool, but also being used at times by the auditors to ask you, can you show me quickly where you're getting your leads from? And, right? So sometimes they want to make sure that you're actually a legitimate legal firm providing legal services compared to just a referral company that's otherwise just passing around leads. Well, that's what we've heard, at least. One of the important lessons learned. Non-engagement letter to clients who are ghost clients. We spoke about that. And when you're dealing with clients, often law societies would come in and talk to you about, and this is a best practice, right? It's a best practice to keep in mind about certain timely updates that you can provide your client to really keep up that professional nature of the business. So a quarterly update to client with a statement of activity. So this is an ongoing matter. It's obviously a very nice practice to send your client with a quarterly update with a statement of activity of all the work that's been put in, the retainer accepted thus far, how much of money has left their trust account, etc. The bill of cost is also a fantastic document that quickly outlines the financial touch points and the nature of that matter at any given time. And if, both for closed clients as well as for ongoing active clients, beyond a quarterly, you could have every 6 months and sometimes a yearly update with a statement of account. And when you actually close a matter, which is a logical closure to a file, you've done your due diligence, you've completed the work, and the matter is closed, and there's a set of documents such as the final closure statement as well as settlement of accounts are good documents that you can consider sending to your client. So a settlement of accounts is one of our favorite at uLaw where we generate that for you, which tells you in a chronological, time-based fashion of everything that's actually occurred in that matter, right from cradle to grave. A retainer letter, the retainer amount accepted, the different dockets, any disbursements, the number of invoices, the amount, the taxes involved, how did the trust transfer happen, how were the retainers accepted, was it a check, right? Gives you complete information so that's full transparency in how you represented the client and the financial obligations that you have to talk about how you appropriated those financial funds. Okay? And then, of course, a closure letter to accompany that settlement of accounts, which basically says, with this letter, we're logically closing the relationship that we have, and we appreciate your business. This not only provides your client with a sense of comfort, it establishes a sense of professionalism, and going back to many of the other webinars we spoke about the branding, talking about the whole customer experience, it also gives a very thorough professional outlook about your firm that obviously would tend to lead to referrals. Okay? And confidence in the structure of legal professionals, right? Okay. And this is a question that was asked by a bunch of our clients and audiences who joined us for several of the other webinars that we did relating to client management, contact management. We've done several such webinars, and we wanted to include this as a slide when we got it approved by the Law Society for the professionalism credits. The question really is, how often do I reach my client, and what are the significant documents that I need to share with them on a regular basis? I want to take a couple of seconds to just talk about this, though I may have to repeat myself. And the purpose of that is we are recording this entire session, and it's available to you on our YouTube channel so that you can utilize this to go through it and prepare such documents. Okay? So in general, we believe law societies recommend you have at least a quarterly review with your client, especially if the matter is opened. Okay? But if it's a quick in and out, then we spoke about the set of documents, right? We'll review that again. The Law Society also recommends that on an annual basis that you send them a statement of account of both your trust and general. And when I say they, it's the client. Okay? And important or significant documents that are expected that you can send your client on a periodic basis are clear and crisp invoices and receipts for both retainers, payments, and for the work that you're doing. Quarterly updates through the statement of activity. We spoke about that. And the statement of activity should cover the dockets, and the account statement should also cover all the activities in the trust and general account. We spoke about that as well. It's important not only to tell your client all the dockets you've got in, but if you can kind of give them a running list of all the touch points, the retainer that they received, how did they receive it, where did it go, went into my trust account, right? I want to make sure that you tell them clearly that it just didn't get into my pocket. It actually went into a trust account. How did you appropriate those funds? You generated an invoice, after which you moved funds from the trust into your general. And then what was the trust balance? Then when was the second invoice, right? So it tells you clearly in simple format how that money was appropriated. A quarterly update with the bill of cost, summary, which covers the total cost of the matter thus far. It also covers the legal cost and any disbursements and discounts, if any, applied. Right? Client fee book and aging report to cover any unpaid invoices. Very important document, more so from your perspective as a legal firm, but also to remind your clients to get your payments. So this is a fantastic segue, for you to do a quick aging report on all your clients, and if someone's not paid you on time, have your assistant or yourself to pick up the phone call and ask for that money. Sometimes generating invoice balance reports can also give you information of any outstanding trust transfers that you have failed to move. Okay? So then you have the statement of accounts. Oh, sorry. Sorry about that. Okay. So a branded, we spoke about the seasonal branding opportunity, and now is a great time. So once you've completed the matter, obviously you have the final closure letter, so the client understands that the matter is completed. But then also providing a branding experience, of providing seasonal cards, Christmas cards with a personalized or branded envelope with your logo and contact information is what we believe is a fantastic way of continuing to keep that relationship with your clients. Okay? Now, in the concept of managing contacts, in dealing with legal professionals now for over 8 to 10 years, we believe legal professionals have limited time to focus on a particular task, because they're always multitasking, especially if you're dealing with, because you have the obligation of a legal professional, a business owner, a marketer, a salesperson, etc., right? So you want to maximize the time that you have. And one way that you can maximize searching for contact is being able to group contacts based on many different facets. You can group your contacts based on the relationship that they have with your law firm, right? So a client is a relationship. It's a client relationship, but it's a contact to begin with. You may have the information stored about a defendant who is the opposing party, let's say doing a plaintiff's claim. You still need to capture the defendant's information. You may even capture the defendant's representative's information, which truly is the party of representative of the opponent, because that's the legal lingo for that party name. So when you group contacts based on the nature of dealing with that contact, it just makes it that much more simpler for you to retrieve that information. Okay? So another example is being able to group areas of practice. So maybe there are multiple areas of practice that you focus on. But let's say a client, you have 100 clients, but then there are 4 areas of practice. And you quickly want to understand, how many clients do I have in my criminal law practice? And if you can actually group these clients by that, you can actually just understand the answer or know the answer by just looking at the group number. So if there's 25, then yeah, there are 25 clients. Likewise, you can group them by other areas of practice that you focus on. So the managing groups is a fantastic way of how you can reduce the time to not only retrieve client information, but also for you to understand your clients to begin with. Clients by type. We spoke about that. If there's a plaintiff, defendant, or if in the case of other family law matters, there's an applicant, respondent, or if it's a landlord-tenant board, there's a landlord or a tenant that you're working with, what are these contact types, representatives of opponents. You can manage co-workers as group of contacts, because they are a type of contact too. And why you manage that, again, if it's a large law firm, pretty much manage all your co-workers as a group in your contacts, which makes it easier for you to associate them across a matter for collaboration. And you can have multiple rates associated with each of those co-workers. It could be for accounts payable purposes, for many reasons, right? You could manage vendors if there are certain types of vendors that you pay expenses to as a business, whether that's Bell, Rogers, TELUS, Walmart, Best Buy, whoever you're dealing with. You could save them as vendors so that it's easy for you to retrieve and also ensure that you're making the right payment to the right vendor. Managing ghost clients, very, very important. So, for example, in uLaw, you can actually mark or group a client as a ghost client, and we spoke about the nature of what that ghost client looks like. But you can also promote that ghost client to a client so that, if the person does come back after a certain time and does engage you, then you don't have to retype that information again. Okay? Managing your source of referral and measuring it for better acquisition, and especially we have legal professionals today investing quite a bit on Facebook ads. You have radio, you have obviously print media. So with the social media being what it is today and gives you a great avenue to promote your business, you truly want to understand if the investment made in those different marketing channels are working for you. So a fantastic way for you to actually assess whether that's working for you is going through that source of contact and ensuring that it's properly updated. So when you do a client intake, and if you're managing groups, you can even manage contacts based on where did they come from as a client, right? Okay, so how do we handle conflict checks for contacts? So what are the main procedures? Obviously, is to complete a conflict screen. You want to make sure that you're searching for a specific combination of name, address, occurrence of an individual that you've just had an intake as a client. Step 2 is really ensuring who's recording the information and how it's being recorded. For example, who handled the actual call? Was it yourself, a colleague, an assistant? Client information such as name, address, phone number. Right, so you want to make sure that you've documented the client search for that. Search results are clearly documented, so clearly a mechanism or a process or a software that gives you occurrences of that name, all parties or people or entities that are involved in working with that client. And even if there was a retainer that was declined, that's important information to be measured in this conflict screening form. It's a Law Society template that we'll quickly walk through. And finally, beyond the Law Society's compliance needs, making sure that you have a mechanism as a business owner to measure and understand your clients better, because that's what's going to give you the edge to serve more clients based on how you work with these clients, the nature of the client. So analytics such as any outstanding invoices, we spoke about that, any days of sale that's extended the initial payment terms. You could even understand profitability by client, or in fact you should, because you can not only understand profitability by the area of practice, but by client too. As a legal professional, you can even understand, or you should have a mechanism of understanding even pro bonos done by client. So if you do pro bono as part of your legal office's policies, then it's important that you also capture the clients that have most benefited from that service. Okay? And the analytics obviously gives you a way to visualize data in a different format. It's not a report format, it's more of a visual chart, table, and insight format. The bottom line for that is to really understand the data that's underlying, process the data, convert that into the appropriate information, consume that information, and take proactive measures to improve upon the business process to make you more successful. And obviously, if you're in the business or if you're in the market for a software or a process that can better manage your legal practice, do consider a legal accounting practice management software that combines all the facets of both legal accounting, business accounting, and practice management, because that gives you a 360 degree of your client's data as well. So it's not just the HST received, it's the disbursement specific to that client, also the business expenses that have been incurred for certain areas of practice too. Okay? And I'm going to take maybe the next 5-6 minutes that we have, or maybe 8 minutes that we have in our webinar today, to walk you through and use uLaw as an example of how you can accomplish some of these tasks that we spoke about. So once again, for those who joined us late, again, uLawPractice, we're a Canadian legal accounting, practice management, and business accounting software company based out of Ottawa. Kindly do give us a chance to show you what we can offer you as a product and as a company that provides top support and services. We do offer a no obligation 30-day trial. But coming more specific to the webinar itself, I'd like to quickly jump back into my first slide. So today's webinar was about the law office client management. And from an agenda perspective, we spoke about how you should manage your client intake, what a compliance set of documents are for that client intake, how important it is to manage groups, and how easy it can make your data retrieval within your firm, dealing with conflict checks, non-engagement, the professional obligations that you have through that process of client intake, service, and communication, law society requirements such as the ID, client ID verification, retainer letter, receipts, conflict screening, source of contact, and the opportunity for you to better assess your contact and client information and utilize it in your branding experience as well. Okay? So let me take now a simple example of how you would go about, let's say, utilizing a practice management for client intake. And I'll start that by using, let's say, a visualization of an iPhone. So I have with me a web visualization of an iPhone that's connected, and this is, you can download the uLaw app both on your iPhone as well as your Android phone. So I'm going to just log in as the same username, password. That I've logged in here. So as Mr. Roger Moore, I'm going to do the same thing with my iPhone. And this is a very pragmatic use case. So yes, there are opportunities for your assistant to update information from your firm, but you may actually take in some very basic information from wherever you are and have maybe your assistant or for yourself to go update it later on at night. So the app obviously provides you with the ability to manage your clients, matters for those clients, your entire accounting information, right, including charts and graphs, your calendar, obviously, to manage time, and we're going to start with the clients where you can use the little plus symbol here and create a new contact. Okay? Or you could actually import from your phone book. So let's say this is Mr. Or let's see. Okay, I'm just going with a random name, Mr. Tremor Johansson. So he's obviously not an organization, but if you're dealing with an organization, you can just say yes to that, right? And this is Mr. Trevor Johansson, and obviously you could intake email, phone, but let's say that's all you have. So you met this individual, right, and then he basically just gave you his card or just gave you very high-level information of just his first name, last name, maybe his phone number. You can enter that. And you do a quick client intake. Very, very fast, right? Now, there are firms that can combine this with a web form on their website, making it a self-serve, and that's possible too. Okay? But the idea is that as soon as you've done it, the opportunity for you to further develop on that contact's information. So maybe someone's given you that information, and that's pretty much it. But once you come back, you have that right now on your web browser the next or the previous night or the next day night. Or let's say your assistant is working on it, you can give him a call and let him know that you're going to expand on this contact a little later. So what was the client intake happened on your iPhone. Now you can take that information and maybe the next day Mr. Trevor calls you to give more information about himself. So this is a very collaborative client intake for today's legal professional. So maybe you didn't have all the other information at that time, but you can always add to it at a later time. right? And I could have marked this to be anything in my phone too, but I just decided not to do it, so I can now update that. And the piece of information that I didn't know at that time was the source of contact. So this truly is your client intake form. So going back to our presentation itself, the client intake form is now, as an experience, divided and given to you in a web experience as well as an app experience, depending on where you are at any time. So now gives you the full flexibility of intaking your client from various devices, right? And you could take information in bits and pieces too. So maybe this was a client referral, maybe this was a word of mouth, or let's think about the example of maybe you did a Facebook ad, and that's what was working. So maybe Mr. Trevor saw your Facebook advertisement, and that's how he got to know you. That's an amazing feedback, because that means your investment on the Facebook ad is working, right? And the same number that we added, it's already there. You can mark this as a work phone number as well. Now you save this information, and it's a two-way street, right? Now this is also available to you on the app. What information is updated there is available to you across all platforms. I guess I have to keep this logged in all the time, but I'll just quickly do that for you. So I can do a quick search, make sure I have all the information right here on my iPhone. Got this updated, so if you use this on your iPhone, you can even do a Google Map search or your iPhone map search of the address itself, if it's a legitimate address. Tells you referral type right away, so when you're doing your analytics, you know, or source of content report, you know where marketing trends are working for. Fantastic. So a collaborative client intake form that allows you to capture information in incremental order. And if you notice, fundamentally, this client is that of a client type. If you've got the concept of groups, you can create new groups, or you can add this to a specific preset existing groups. So assuming that Mr. Trevor this is a small claims matter, and he wants you to represent him in a slip and fall dispute with his neighbor, and let's say he is the plaintiff, you can also add him to your plaintiff's group, right? Now you may have a separate group for small claims. You could, right? And if you do, you could actually add this contact as part of your small claim clients. Assuming Mr. Trevor has given you all this information and actually has not retained you for a certain period of time, then it is important that you add him to the ghost client group. Okay, so that one single contact, depending on the life cycle that it represents or presents itself, gives you the flexibility to be categorized into different groups. So that it's easier for you to review that information, right? So let me go back real quick. If I want to know who are the ghosts, I have 7 ghost clients right now. Right away it tells you. And it tells you who those different ghost clients are. And it tells you that Trevor Johansson is the most recent ghost client that we just added. Now several weeks go by, and then Trevor comes back and he says, hey, I'm sorry I was out of country. Here's, let's do this work. I want to file that case with my neighbor. You can easily promote him out. You can say delete from the ghost clients. He's no more part of that group. So now your ghost client count reduces to 6, and you have complete control over the information about your client. Okay? Now you can search for it right here, because search is one of the most painful practices that legal firms have if you don't have especially a software or a methodology to search for it fast. Okay? So let's assume that Trevor Johansson is going forward with engaging you. So before you create that matter, we spoke about the obligation. So ensuring you have a client ID verification so you can have this signed as a template that's available, provided to you by the Law Society. It's readily available in uLaw as a downloadable form, pre-populated with whatever information is already available. You can say I got the driver's license. You can obviously now scan the driver's license and make that as part of the file and store this or sign this document. Moving along, let's do a quick conflict screening, making sure that you've never dealt with a Trevor, never created a matter for, or have you created a matter for someone like Trevor, or have you even come across someone like Trevor? Okay? And one of the beauties of the product is that it's on the cloud, so you can do parallel processing. As you're tracking that, you can also go about, just for the purpose of the demo, let me show you what a source of contact report looks like. So if I were to generate a monthly report, right? Let's have a look at what that source of contact report tells us. So for the month of December, from the 1st till now, return of the date, this is the spread of source of contacts for all the clients that we've had in intake. So 29% of our clients for this month came through friends. They're referred by friends. About 15% or 14% came through the web Facebook. About another 14% through website, another 14% through legal aid, and so on and so forth. Now there are certain clients that are not categorized either. So there's about 3 of them. Mr. Peter Hain, okay, and Mr. Holland Jeremy. This gives you the opportunity to quickly search up that contact and ensure that you're now adding information. So let's say Mr. Peter Hain does give you a call and does give you how did he get to know you. Maybe this was through the same Facebook ad that you invested in. Then it's very important that you go about entering that data right away. Because the more right the data is, the more right the actions are on the data. Okay? Okay. So we've done the client intake, we've done the conflict screening, right? And we've also done the source of contact. And let's look at what that conflict screening has resulted. So this document tells me that I've taken the Hans from Johansson, and there's actually a Peter Hans as a last name conflict. There are a few Johnsons that sound like Johansson, so names that sound similar to your conflict of your contact. So there's a Johnson first name, there's a Bob Johnson, there's actually a Traver, not a Trevor, but a Traver. There's a Chad Johnson, so you get the idea. And as per the Law Society, this conflict screening report or search is also date stamped. So you know, as per today, these are the results. Okay? So really the next step is, let's assume that you actually agreed there's no conflicts. Let's go ahead and create that matter, because it's only there that you're actually going to do your retainer letter and all the bunch of documents that you need. Okay, so I'll take another couple more minutes to walk you through that process. Very straightforward. Okay, so let's say we mark this as a small claims matter, and we'll call it the slip and fall. We can also associate these contacts as additional parties. Because as I mentioned, that's a great way to help with the conflict screening as well, but also to help with court forms automation. That's something that's part of your legal life. So let's assume Trevor is the plaintiff. You can also add the defendant's information. And that's why it becomes very important that you also mark the contacts as per the different parties, So you can bring up, add the party as a defendant, and let's search up a defendant, Mr. Stefan Edberg. So now you've associated a contact to this particular client as a relationship to this file as the defendant. Maybe it's Trevor versus Stefan, should have been the slip and fall title, right? Likewise, you can also add the representative of the opponent to be Steffi Doe. Now this does two things. One, it allows you, now it's just added more information to your conflict screening. So if someone like Stefan Edberg shows up, then you know that you've actually dealt with a Stefan Edberg as a defendant for this file. And the second thing it does, it gives uLaw the ability for you to generate automated court forms, especially if it's a plaintiff claim, and let's say you're dealing with Brown Courthouse. It gives you the opportunity to update information and that form faster. Okay. But let's also generate a set of documents. So let's look at the compliance nature of the documents. So from a client intake perspective, these are just clickable, downloadable forms. A client ID verification document, we've already done that. A client intake form, we've already done that. Conflict screening report. So we've done the conflict screening, but this document gives you the opportunity to further explain why you determined this to be a conflict or not conflict. So you can say this is a new client. There's no conflict. I did not refer him to someone else. I did not decline his retainer, and you signed this. Okay? And then comes the retainer letter. And now you can have various different samples, simple, elaborate, flat rate. You can generate it in PDF, Word. You can even have retainer letters based on silos of practice. So you can have Hurley, contingency. You can have POA based, right? So again, having different templates for different areas of practice. And having a plan of action for an authorization letter as well. Okay? And as you can see, quarterly client statements such as statement of activity, bill of cost, settlement accounts. And for whatever reason, this client is going to non-engage you, you can sign that non-engagement letter. A closing letter once the work is done as well. Let me quickly show you the court form itself, which associated Stefan and Steffi as the defendant and the representative of the opponent as well. And this is a template provided by the Law Society. Okay. So it pre-populates all the information, what was this matter about, what was done in the particular file. Okay. And here's that court form, which has all the information, the courthouse information, the client Johansson was the plaintiff, his address, your address because I'm logged in as the fixtures legal professional, the defendant's information, and the representative's information. Okay? So as you could see, it's very important that you have a plan of action of how you manage your client information and a set of documents that you prepare yourself to provide, both to provide a legal compliance as well as a comfort to your client as well as to your business. And you know, do the right research to find the right product that would automate many of these documents to be pre-populated if possible. Or if you're going to do this in a manual way, ensure that you have the methodology and the process and the right individuals who can help you with that. Okay? And that's if you're doing a retainer letter, we spoke about that. A retainer receipt is very important. Making sure you generate that receipt as and when you receive that retainer. And all this can be done when Trevor is still in the office, or if Trevor is actually calling you from, you could send him a PDF with a link to pay this by credit card, right? So here's the last document that I'll show you for today, which is again branded. We spoke about taking opportunities to brand it. Here's the receipt, and you can actually request him to top this up $500 as well. But you sign this, have Trevor sign this. That's the retainer receipt for this particular matter. Has all the information, the receipt number, the date, who was this for, their address, the amount, what was it for, and how did they pay for it. Okay? So again, going back to our presentation for today, the topic was on Law Office Client Management, Managing Your Client 101, with the chief agenda points being how you ensure you do a client intake, all the compliance set of documents that are expected out of you, including the client ID verification, retainer letter, receipts, source of contact, and how you can use a collaborative environment, being today's legal professional, to manage the client intake and the data about these clients across multiple platforms. Okay? So with that, I'll conclude today's webinar, and I'll wait to answer any questions that the audience may have. Our support staff obviously are providing answers on the chat window as well. And once again, thank you everyone for joining us in today's webinar, and we'll wait for any more questions. Okay, we have a question about the data analytics of clients. Okay, yep. So, I mean, I'll show it to you right on the phone, but I could also do it on the web. But the analytics really gives you the key capability to know, for example, I want to know my fee book by clients. I want to know it for the entire quarter. You can generate that and gives you the top 20 customers, right? It gives you a pie chart, tells you who are the different customers and how much of revenue have they contributed in this quarter. And you can really compare that expense, or I would say fee book by client to this whole year. Right? So you can really, the data really gives you insight into your clients themselves, or your top paying clients in a specific time period. So Shopify is one of our top clients. They've spent about almost $22,000 with this. Not only that, you can also understand what expenses have I incurred across these customers for the whole year. So which are the clients for whom I have actually spent a lot of money? Okay? You can see Mr. Peter Zachary is almost $10,000 of expenses. I can even go to the point of understanding pro bono charts by client. But I really want to understand who are the clients who have really taken advantage of the pro bono work that I've put in. There it tells you Mr. Indiana Jones had about 8 hours of pro bono, followed by Mr. Bean Murphy, about 4.5, right? And you can do the same thing on the phone too. If you're actually a fast traveler and you only have the phone, you can have the same experience on the phone. It's more visually engaging, I believe, on the phone. But that's the kind of data. I hope I answered the question, but that's the kind of data that uLaw would present to you. If I go into my accounts, I click on this little question mark, I could choose the category. I could say expense chart by category, the same set of things. Fee book chart by client, and I can do this just for the month. It tells me clearly Sandra Superwoman was about 17%. Now, if I wanted more, I could actually have 6 channels. So let's say I actually want to know the top 6. I can quickly understand who are my top 6 clients. By default, it gives you 5. You can really move those candles and do a deeper dive. You can also have a tabular structure or a bar graph right on your iPhone. And the same thing applies to your Android as well. And you can pick and choose whatever insight that you needed right here. Okay? So client fee book is another great example. Really want to understand, at least for this month, there was not much of insight, but you can do it for the whole year. Hope that answered the question. So those are the types of analytics we're talking about. The next question is about the authorization letter and types of templates for non-engagement. We just start you off with the basic template list of templates, but we can also work with you to understand if you have existing templates that can be brought in. But within the product itself, you have non-engagement letter and samples for authorization letters. And we provide it to you in I believe in a fillable document. So if this is a non-engagement letter, we give you pre-populated information based on what we know, but you can also use this to fill it out yourself. And again, today's webinar has been accredited for 1 hour of CPD credits. So maybe for the last question, yeah, we do a profit and loss. You can do aging by client. Those are all the reports that you can generate, as I mentioned. But in fact, you can even go to the individual client's contact information, right? And basically do an aging report right from the client. So let's say Mr. Adam Brown, who you dealt with, comes back after quite a long time. You can actually generate an aging report for Mr. Adam Brown right here. Very specific to that client. And the report clearly tells you, as well as your assistant or whoever is dealing with it, or someone who's just new to the office, the exact information that everybody sees. So Mr. Adam hasn't paid this $220 for almost 597 days for this particular Adam child support matter. He hasn't paid another $271 for another $597 for this matter. Obviously, he hasn't paid a total of that much over that date range, right? Obviously, that is ridiculous, but this is all test data. But at least gives you the idea of the power of the reporting to give you the data insight. Maybe Mr. Adam doesn't get a Christmas card that year. Just saying, just kidding. But that's the kind of information that you can generate out of the report. Okay. Now, if there aren't any more questions, well, we want to thank you on behalf of uLaw for everyone who's joined us today, for the fantastic support you've provided us. We've recently been awarded 5 awards by the Canadian Lawyer magazine for being a top-rated practice management legal accounting product. And this was surveyed based on surveys sent out to legal professionals across the country. So I want to thank everyone who voted for us. And we thank you for joining us on this webinar, and we hope to provide you with more webinars in the new year. Today would be the last CPD session and webinar session for the year. And once again, thank you from the bottom of our heart, wishing you and your family a very happy holiday season. And we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar in the new year. Thank you. And yes, this would be available and recorded to you and available on the YouTube channel as early as Monday. Thank you, everyone. Have yourself a fantastic Friday afternoon.